Okay, but what does botanists do? I think they study plants or something?
No, I meant the armor skill.
Oh, why didn't you say so? I got no freaking clue.
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, since reaching the proper endgame of Monster Hunter Wilds, we've spent a fair bit of time on and off testing different skills, especially the ones that are new, or even just the ones that are a bit more vague, and today we're essentially going to go over the detail of every new skill, the group skills, the set bonuses, talking about how good they actually are in the grand scheme of things, and we will also be touching on any major skills from previous Monster Hunter games that have seen notable changes in Wilds. A big example will be our first entry today, and it's worth noting that we'll be splitting these up by their skill category, starting with weapon skills, then moving to armor skills, then onto the group skills, and then set bonuses. Starting off then with weapon skills at the top of the list is attack boost. In Monster Hunter Wilds, this is a 5-rank skill, and while this has been a pretty highly sought after skill on and off in different Monster Hunter games for years, it's actually pretty disappointing in Wilds in the way that things work. It gives you a fairly small amount of flat raw increase per rank, and then plus 2% raw increase at 4 ranks, 4% raw attack increase at 5 ranks. An average proper endgame weapon will probably have 210 to 220 attack. If you're wondering why I'm getting that number, go to your options and turn off damage coefficients. This will normalize the damage numbers between all weapons, so they will all have the same numbers to work with. So let's just call it 220 attack on an endgame weapon to be a bit favorable to this skill. 4% of 220 attack is 8.8. We round that up to 9, add the flat 9 raw that you get from that skill rank to begin with, and that would mean that you'd get 18 raw attack total for 5 weapon skill ranks. That is around an 8% damage increase for that 220 weapon that we use calculating this for, and consider that most weapons have specific skills they want to use weapon slots for, like focus or power prolonger, rapid morph, guard skills, sharpness management. You have 1, maybe 2 decoration slots that you'll be able to fill with offensive weapon skills, so keep in mind that this is around 18 raw or 8% attack increase as we progress down the list to the potentially more meaningful things. Next up then is critical eye. This is now 5 ranks as well, like attack boost is. 4% affinity gained per rank, which isn't fantastic. Full 5 ranks is 20% affinity, which for base value of crits is approximately a 5% damage increase, but this does go up if you're working in crit boost. If you have full ranks of crit boost, then 20% affinity is actually worth 8% damage, which makes it much more comparable to attack boost. That said, most efficient affinity actually comes from armor skills in Wilds, so getting affinity on your weapon is actually sort of tough to build around, and this again will not be used a whole lot compared to its status in previous games. After that we have critical boost, and this is essentially the top priority weapon skill for offense on raw attack builds outside of weapon specific skills, meaning that this is great for anything that isn't element based specifically. This skill has actually been nerfed in Wilds compared to previous games, as it is now a 5 rank skill instead of a 3 rank skill, and it gives you 3% bonus raw damage on critical hits that you get per rank of the skill. The default bonus damage when you crit is 25%. With 5 full ranks of critical boost though, this goes up to 40%. That means if you have 50% affinity, so you crit on half of all of your hits, this would be an 8.5% damage increase over just the base critical damage numbers. If you have 100% affinity, it is a 17% increase, which is more than double what you'd get from 5 ranks of attack boost or critical eye. As a result, most strong, non-element focused offensive builds will get as close to 100% affinity as they can through armor, talisman, and mantle, and then slop that crit boost into the weapon for a nice big damage increase. An important note for all 3 of these skills as well is that they are awkwardly 5 ranks. Most of the top tier endgame weapons only have 3 slot decoration slots, and getting 5 ranks of a skill with multiple 3 slot decorations is just plain awkward, so that does matter as well. Moving on, we'll get a bit quicker here now that we're out of the first main skills there. Critical draw is definitely better in Wilds than it has been in previous games. It gives you 100% affinity for all 3 ranks, which is quite good. It's how it was in World, and it lasts for around 3 seconds after your first draw attack is launched, which means that it can be delayed with things like hammer full charge, but getting all of your affinity from a weapon skill is awkward to build around at the endgame just because of the way that the skills are split between weapon and armor. So again, while this is the strongest version of critical draw that we've had, honestly, it is sort of awkward to use in Wilds, and so I don't generally recommend it unless you're very specifically trying to make a crit draw build. Then we have some ranged weapon specific skills, starting with opening shot. This is a new skill for bowguns only, and it's around 5% increased reload speed per rank, which is pretty good. 2.5% increased damage on opening shot per rank, meaning the first shot of a brand new reload. This means for 3 ranks, it's a total of 15% reload speed increase, which is very, very good, is the only real source of this in the game, but then also a 7.5% increase to the damage on the opening shot. Generally quite good as a bowgun skill in general that I recommend a lot. Then we have tetrad shot. This is a new skill that increases the affinity of your 4th attack and the attack of your 4th and 6th attack. This one gets a bit awkward, obviously, as it applies to both bows and bowguns, and it has this weird 4 and then 4 and 6 sort of layout, but honestly, just treat it as a passive damage increase that will happen occasionally, and it will be just sort of nice. It does also treat bows and bowguns with slightly different numbers, which makes the actual calculations a bit weird. That said, attack is the same for all ranged weapon types from this, being a 1.5% increase for rank 1, 2.5% increase for rank 2, and then a 5% increase to attack for rank 3 when the skill triggers. For bowguns, the affinity bonus per rank is 8%, then 10%, then 12%, and for bows it is instead 3%, then 6%, then 10% affinity at full ranks. Artillery, this has changed in Wilds to the way that it's actually presented, really. The numbers are a little bit funky, but they're clearly trying to be the same thing, and it's not quite perfect because it only seems to affect a portion of the damage for the attacks it affects. But more or less, it's a bit less than a 10% increase for the first rank for the weapons it affects, a bit less than 20% for the second rank, and a bit less than 30% increase in damage for the third rank. It's absolutely worth at level 3 for things like impact charge blade, gunlance, or sticky bowgun, though. Then we have Charge Up, which is new as a skill, however it was a rampage skill in Sunbreak. I'm not exactly sure what the exact values are on this until we have data mines, but what this does is increase the stun value of charged attacks with your hammer that hit the head. This was around a 30% stun value increase on charged attacks in Sunbreak, so that's what I would assume it is right now until somebody actually looks into the files and finds out the exact number. Then we have Guard, and Guard is now a 3-rank skill in Wild, which is honestly blessed compared to how it has been sometimes in the past, but it also is a weapon skill, which is very awkward for something that boosts your guarding ability. That said, it's still worth using with guard heavy weapons for sure. Anything that does have a shield and will be guarded constantly wants to have full ranks of guard because it lets you keep up your offense more too. Then we have Load Shells. This isn't necessarily too different than it has been in the past, but Charge Blade now has an overfilled vial mechanic, which makes this just much stronger to get in general, even though it already was strong before. Then moving on, we have the new skills or chain skills that count as armor skills instead of weapon skills, meaning that they only show up on armor, armor decorations, and talismans, and let's start with Adrenaline Rush. This is now a 5-rank skill that gives you bonus attack after you iframe a monster's attack, and this one is quite interesting because you can activate Adrenaline Rush by rolling through the start of an attack, and if you still get hit by the back end of the attack, you will both get hit and activate this effect, even though logically that shouldn't be able to happen. That is how it works. This also is activated by any inbuilt iframe attacks for different weapons, things like longsword and dual blades being the biggest winners that I've seen. Bow and hammer and even sword and shield can also activate this if you play a specific way with the purpose of trying to do so. That said, for the first rank you get plus 10 raw attack, then you get plus 5 raw for each of the other ranks for plus 30 at full ranks, and it lasts for 30 seconds after you trigger the effect. And it's honestly quite good for any of the weapons that can take extra advantage of this from things that aren't just a pure dodge roll. Then we have Peak Performance, which is now a 5-rank skill that gives you 3 attack at rank 1, 6 attack at rank 2, 10 attack at rank 3, 15 attack at rank 4, and 20 attack at rank 5 when you are at full health and at no other point. It's not great for 5 ranks of this skill for that amount of raw attack, and with the requirement of actually being full health, which you will be most of the time, but probably not all the time. Then we have Weakness Exploit, which is now a 5-rank skill, which is definitely a nerf from how it's been in the past. This gives bonus affinity against weak monster parts, which is whenever you have orange damage numbers pop up when hitting the monster with your weapon. Even more, it will also give you even further bonus affinity to wounded parts. Non-wound affinity is 5% gained per rank except the final rank, which is 10, for 30% total from all 5 ranks. Wounded affinity is 3% for the first rank, 5% for the second rank, and then 5% for each remaining rank up to 20%. So if you hit a weak wounded part with full weakness exploit in your set, you will gain 50% affinity, which is quite a strong gain for 5 armor skill ranks. Then we have Maximum Might, which is super effective and definitely being underutilized so far, but people people will catch on to it. It was good in base Monster Hunter World, but then they nerfed how it works. Whenever you go under maximum stamina, you lose this buff, and then when you get back to maximum stamina, you have to wait 3 seconds before it actually reactivates. However, in Wilds, this is even more confusing than it has been in the past, and after you go under maximum stamina, you have a 2-second grace period to get back to max stamina before the buff drops off. So if you only use very, very small amounts of stamina in very short bursts, you can actually keep this active extremely easily, and given that this is 10% affinity per rank of an armor skill that is also a 2-slot decoration filler, it is very high value for anything that can keep it active most of the time and doesn't require things like stamina management to begin with. So everything pretty much except for like bow and dual blades, I would say. Then we have Convert Element as a new skill, a brand new skill, and this is actually a pretty intricate one. This gives you bonus dragon damage after taking any elemental damage from a monster, and this will also give you occasional pops of bonus dragon damage too. The actual dragon element damage gained per rank is 80, 120, and then 180. As you deal dragon damage, you will get bonus pops of dragon damage that will trigger, so more elemental focus means more pops. And the pops are as big as around 300 damage when I've caught them actually happening. So this is essentially a required skill for dragon element builds, as it is a massive increase to dragon element. It may also even make you overcap on dragon element depending on the weapon that you're using and the setup that you have, so you actually need to be a little bit careful with this, and it depends on your weapon you're using, how many ranks of it you actually want to use. Then next up we have Elemental Absorption, the sort of counterpart to that skill, and the activation for this is similar to the last one. It's when you get hit by an elemental attack, but this will increase any element damage that you have, regardless of the damage you take. The amount that you gain is though weapon specific. The average is around 30 to 50 bonus element for the first rank, 50 to 100 for the final rank, with fast weapons having the low end of that, slow weapons having the higher end. Resistance type gained does depend on damage type taken, however, and of course that means it's even more useful for the fights as it makes you more defensive to the things you're already getting hit by. Then we have Self-Improvement. This isn't necessarily a new skill, but the way that it works in Wilds is very important to be aware of, because the way that it reads is very vague, but potentially good, because it says that it increases your attack and defense as the quest timer goes on. Depending on what those numbers actually are, it could have been good, but it's garbage. This isn't even a percent attack increase, it's worth noting. It is a flat low attack increase after very set points of time during the quest. Specifically, you gain 4 attack and 5 defense after 10 minutes, then you get 8 attack and 10 defense after 20 minutes have passed, and then 12 attack and 15 defense after 30 minutes of the quest timer has passed. That means that this is decent for the early game if you're ever in a quest that lasts longer than 10 minutes. However, also it is somewhat usable too, because it's one of the only sources of actual offense from a 1-slot armor decoration. But it only matters at all. It will only have any effect in the slightest if you have a hunt that lasts more than 10 minutes. And even if it does, it's literally 4 attack and 5 defense. It's not that much. Then we have Burst. This skill was in Sunbreak. It was originally called Chain Critical, but then they renamed it to Burst, and it does function a bit differently in Wilds too. This is, however, a super high value skill for both raw and element builds, and basically every weapon except for Greatsword can get this full bonus active before its biggest hits, which is where this effect matters most. So what this does is give you a slight attack boost after your first hit within a short window, and then after you get 5 hits in a row, you will get the full boost active. You have a 4-second window in which you have to hit the monster again to keep the boost going and keep the boost active, which is enough for most weapons by default, but you can even increase the duration of this window with the Ebony Odogaron set bonus. For the full list of effects this has for each weapon, because it is different for each weapon and it is different for element and raw, here's this handy spreadsheet that was put together by Lord Feitner, which is more concise than I could ever word it myself. In short, this skill is one of the best offensive armor skills, bar none, in Monster Hunter Wilds. Then next up we have Foray, and this skill has existed in the past, and what it does is increase your attack and affinity against poisoned or paralyzed monsters. So generally when you'd want to use this is if you're running a poison or paralysis build. That said, paralysis is very inconsistent, so it's not really worth using with a paralysis build, so let's just think about poison, because with a good poison weapon and with poison duration up as a skill too, as a weapon skill, you can keep really high uptime on poison against monsters, so you can actually activate the skill reasonably well, but it is super high investment for the actual amount that you get. So to put it simply, at the first rank you get 6 attack when this is active, at the second rank you get 8 attack and 5% affinity, at the third rank you get 10 attack and 10% affinity, at the fourth rank you get 12 attack and 15% affinity, and then at the final rank you get 15 attack and 20% affinity, which is decent, but it's very high investment for this regardless, and it is a conditional damage increase. monsters, which means it is less value than something that is simply constant. As well, it also locks out elemental weapons because you have to apply the statuses for this to even work. Then next up we have flayer, and this is a new skill in Monster Hunter Wilds, obviously because it focuses around the wound mechanic, which is wild specific, and what it does is increase your rate of wound creation when you hit body parts by 5% for the first rank, 10% for the second rank, 15% for the third rank, 20% for the fourth rank, and then 30% for the final rank. Then, as you continually hit monsters, it will give you pops of bonus flat damage occasionally, which is sort of hard to quantify when these happen and how valuable they are, and the wound creation part of this is really big for comfort. It's especially big for weapons like insect glaive or charge blade that get a ton of really powerful stuff whenever they get to use their focus strike, and it gives you more part drops as well, of course, because that's how wounds work. It gives you more flinches because destroying wounds makes flinches happen, but it's hard to quantify for offense. It's extremely comfortable, it's great for utility, it's definitely a high tier skill, and it does increase your offense, but it's hard to place specifically. Then we have Part Breaker, which is essentially a combo point to flayer right now currently in Wilds, and this works how it did previously in different games, giving you increased part damage, which doesn't mean that it increases your damage to the monster, it means that it makes it easier to break parts, but now it also has a secondary effect of giving you 10% at first rank, 20% at second rank, and 30% at full ranks increased damage to focus strikes that destroy wounds. Then for your armor skills we have Coalescence, which is probably the biggest difference in Wild to how it used to work in previous games. This gives you an increase to stats after you clear an abnormal status, meaning any elemental blight, any status, anything like that that affects your character as a debuff that you then remove. In Wilds, however, this no longer increases your attack at all, sadly, but it does seem to be changed to be a percent increase of base element and status, not a flat numerical increase as it used to be. This means that it has the potential to be much stronger, but it's also fairly odd, and I should specify when I say that it is a percentage of base element or status, what I mean is that it is a percent increase of the base element on the weapon itself. If you do something like have 3 fire attack as a skill on top of this as well, the percent increase from Coalescence will not affect the fire attack bonus. It will only affect the base element on the weapon itself. That said, here are the numbers right now. For all weapons, the status is the same, which is 5% increased status effect per rank after you've activated this effect, and for element, it's different for about half of the weapon types. However, greatsword, hammer, hunting horn, gunlance, switch axe, and charge blade all gain 10% bonus element per rank, which is actually a very large amount because that's 30% at full 3 ranks whenever this is active, and that's nuts. Whereas longsword, sword and shield, dual blades, lance, insect glaive, and bow gain 5% increased element per rank of the skill. It is still quite good in Wilds, but it depends how much you can fit it, how much you can activate it, so it's sort of dependent now how much you actually want to use this. That said, next up we have Ambush, which is another new skill in Monster Hunter Wilds, which is essentially a variation of sneak attack that we had in Sunbreak, but this gives you 5% increase to your attack, so a percent increase to all of your attack for 30 seconds after a successful sneak attack. The thing is, you aren't likely to get a sneak attack more than like maybe twice, 3 times in a hunt if you really push it, and this only lasts for 30 seconds after you do it, so it isn't going to give you that much value in general. It's a really cool idea, and you could probably make some niche builds around it, but you won't see this in anything meta, at least as far as I can tell. Then we should also talk about Counter Strike. The actual numbers behind this skill have not changed since Rise and Sunbreak, however, it has mechanically shifted a little bit, and that you can activate this now with hyper armor attacks on specific weapons, meaning that you can keep this active very easily with things like Greatsword using shoulder tackle, or switch axe's hyper armor as well as a couple of examples, but this just makes this skill way more valuable for specific weapons than it used to be, because you don't have to actively take the knockback and the damage to actually make it work. Then next up we have the final armor skill I'm going to be talking about today, which is Antivirus. This is a new one within Monster Hunter Wilds, and it makes recovery from the frenzy status 10% easier per rank up to 30% at full ranks, and it increases the affinity that you gain after clearing the frenzy by 3% for the first rank, 6% for the second rank, and 10% for the third rank. This skill says it will increase your affinity by 15% at full ranks, but in actual testing it is only a 10% increase, never 15. Go ahead, check it in the training room yourself, it's always 10%. It is still, however, really good if you're using the 2-set Gore Magala armor bonus, otherwise it is entirely useless unless you are specifically fighting frenzied monsters, and then it's just sort of fine. Then we have the group skills, and these don't have a whole lot of numbers that we can properly go on them because of how they work. Scaling prowess for increased mount ability and increased ability to create wounds while mounting is generally quite good if you can fit it in, but it's not worth making your entire set around just trying to fit in the group skills, generally speaking. Same thing for fortifying pelt. This is basically just fortify from previous Monster Hunter games. It gives you increased attack and defense whenever you die on a quest, so if you think you're gonna die, or if you're playing solo, you can get a decent amount of value out of this if you're not just gonna run over the monster in the first place. There's also alluring pelt, which makes monsters more likely to target you, and this is specifically good for guard and offset weapons, things where you want the monster to actually be looking at you the entire time. Then we get to some more funkier ones. We have Lord's Favor, which is mostly just the duna set. This is really funky, and it gives around a 10% attack gain for Hunting Horn when a melody affects your allies. But it is a bad armor set, sadly, overall for the most part. It's not really worth that group bonus to go for it just for that. Then we have Guardian's Pulse, and this is not bad for stamina-intensive weapons against Guardians, as it will increase your stamina regen whenever you're near the Wilk crystals that Guardians do create. Then we have Guardian's Protection as well, which increases your resistances when you're specifically fighting in the Wyvria map, the 5th map, and if you're not fighting there, it has no effect, so it's not bad when you're in there, and it doesn't matter when you aren't. Then moving on, let's talk about the set bonus skills. These are the bonuses that you get for investing in a specific monster, either for 2 parts or 4 parts for the majority of them. Deshagama's Might is the set bonus for Deshagama armor. You can combine this between Deshagama and Guardian Deshagama, and you will actually still get the bonuses working together. And what this does is give you increased attack after a successful power clash or offset, and it gives you 10 attack for the 2 set bonus and 25 attack for the 4 set bonus. This is especially good relatively early, like especially in early low rank if you can get Deshagama armor and you're a weapon that has offsets, because power clashes won't happen that often, but offsets are entirely dependent on how good you are at using your offsets if you're a weapon that has one. So if you are, then this isn't bad at all. Then we have Rathalos's Flare for the Scorcher effect, and this isn't bad for fire element sets. What this basically does is just as you deal damage to a monster, it will add an extra pop of fire damage. It's not bad, but it's not fantastic either. Then we have Shuwu Vigor, gives you attack after eating items such as a well done steak. This will give you 15 attack for the 2 set bonus and 25 attack for the 4 set bonus, which, you know, in a vacuum by itself is quite good, but when you're considering the actual skills on the armor and comparing it to later game armor and later game set bonuses, it is quite limiting and it's not that great in comparison. Then we have Gravios's Protection, which is the Gravios armor set bonus. The 2 set bonus gives you 5% damage reduction when you're at full health. The 4 set bonus gives you a 10% damage reduction when you're at full health. Nothing currently one-shots in wilds unless you don't have the food buff active, which would be your fault. So it's a bit of a waste to use this set bonus at all. It only might save you some potion economy. It won't save you from actual deaths as far as anything that I can imagine. Then we have the Blangonga's Spirit set bonus for the Blanganga armor, and this gives 10 raw attack for the 2 set bonus or 20 raw attack for the 4 set bonus to nearby allies, not to yourself, when you use the 2 victory gesture. This is very funky, and it could be decent for group hunts if you want to be like a full support build where you don't do much damage yourself or something, maybe, but that's generally not recommendable, and again, I feel like later armor sets just tend to be better. Then we have Guardian Ebony Odogaron set bonus, which is Ebony Odogaron power, and this is quite good. It actually increases the effect of the burst skill, which we talked about earlier, being very strong. What this does is gives you plus 3 attack for the 2 set bonus and plus 10 attack for the 4 set bonus, while the full effect of burst is active, which makes burst even stronger. This will also increase the window before burst drops off by 1 second for the 2 set bonus and 2 seconds for this 4 set bonus. So it actually makes it even more comfortable for the slower weapons to have the set bonus, as well as giving you the extra attack too. This set bonus is super good before the final armor sets are unlocked. I would say it is one of the best armor sets in the game that you can use before you get to the final bits of endgame. That said, it starts to lose value in comparison once those actually happen. Some weapons can still justify the 2 set even in endgame just to make burst more functional, but that is a bit touch and go. Then we have Fulgur Anjanat's Will as a set bonus, which gives you 25 bonus maximum stamina for the 2 set bonus and 50 bonus maximum stamina for the big set bonus of 4 pieces. This is decent if you actually care a lot about stamina, and it is worth mentioning that this does show up as basically a second stamina bar rather than counting as part of an extension of the first bar, which also makes us, interestingly, make maximum might stay active as long as you don't eat into your main stamina bar and only stay in this second one granted by the set bonus. So this set bonus does have niche, very good use with maximum might specifically, which we talked about being very good earlier too. That said, next up is Duna's Cover, the first of the Apex set bonuses. This will increase your defense while you are wearing a specialized tool by 25 for the 2 set bonus bonus, or 50 and 12 all resistance for the forceps bonus. This is interesting, but it is defense oriented, which is limited in the first place, and even with full tool specialist max mantle uptime is below 30% of a hunt on average, so this is very, very niche, but it is a fun bit of flavor that does fit what duna is, essentially. Then we have Raidow's Voltage. This gives you 30 extra seconds of latent power for the 2-set bonus, or 90 extra seconds of latent power for the 4-set bonus, which is actually quite good for latent power as a skill, but the armor itself is weak compared to later game options, and latent power as a skill is quite niche to begin with. There's only a couple of weapons that even can use this, and even those ones tend not to. Then we have new Udra's Mutiny as a set bonus 2. This deals small amounts of bonus damage when you hit with Resentment active as a skill. It also has an internal cooldown on the actual pop of damage, so faster weapons do not proc this more often than slower weapons, and it is the same amount of damage when it pops regardless of what weapon type you're using. So the more consistent your attacks are, the more you'll actually get from this, but it's honestly pretty minor. It's not very worth at all. Then we have Jin Dahaad's set bonus, Jin Dahaad's Revolt. This gives you a 2-set bonus of 25 attack, or a 4-set bonus of 50 bonus attack after you recover from being webbed, frostblighted, pinned, or power clash for seemingly 60 seconds afterwards. Power clash weapons get some decent value from this, but it takes a lot of investment still, and of course you're probably not going to be power clashing every 60 seconds, so this won't have full uptime. Then we have Gore Magala's Tyranny, and this is probably the strongest set bonus in the entire game if you look at it by itself. The 2-set inflicts you with Frenzy whenever you are against any large monster. However, this may sound like a bad thing, but if you clear the Frenzy, by default, that will give you 15% bonus affinity for a while afterwards. This can also be used to trigger the antivirus skill, which says that it's 15% bonus affinity at 3 ranks, but as we went over earlier, it's actually only 10%, but still, with those combined together, you get 25% bonus affinity for this set bonus combined with the skill. Then you have the 4-set bonus, and this gives you 10 raw attack when you are inflicted with the frenzy, and 15 raw attack after you recover from the frenzy. So not only is this essentially a permanent attack increase with just varying amounts depending on the flow of the fight, but it also gives you the big boost when you have the affinity gained as well, so it's a very strong overlap. This is probably the most valuable 2-set, whether you want to use the full 4 or only the 2. It is very, very good. It's incredible armor for any offensive build. Then we have Arkveld's Hunger as a set bonus, and this just gives you small bits of health after a few hits. The number of hits that it takes depend on the weapon, as does the amount of health that you get. It's not terrible, it's not great for most. There are better options for pure recovery, and you wouldn't take it for this bonus, but if you happen to get this bonus because you're using the armor anyways, it's just that. It is a nice bonus. Then we have the final set bonus then, which is Guardian Arkveld's Vitality. This gives you a large chunk of health recovered whenever you destroy a wound on a monster. This pairs extremely well with flayer, pairs extremely well with weapons that focus on wounds, but even if you don't use focus strikes to destroy wounds and you just keep damaging them until they pop, this will still give you the health when you do it. For the 2-set bonus, you get 25 health when you do this. For the 4-set bonus, you get 50 health when you do this, which is a pretty large amount, especially because this does stack up with the recovery up skill to increase the amount recovered by up to double. This is a simple, clean, powerful recovery set bonus. It is a major heal anytime you destroy a wound, which you just will because it's a natural and important part of Wilds hunting combat in general. That's it then, everyone. Pretty much all the new skills and any old skills that have changed in important ways in Monster Hunter Wilds, as well as the group skills and the set bonuses as well. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, and hopefully it helps you out as well. And if you know any interesting tidbits or information about the skills in here that I didn't manage to mention here, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.